So sometimes at the shop, I'm more excited to work on some things as opposed to other things. For example, if I'm just painting a boring bumper, that's boring, that's whatever, that's not that exciting. But the Hellcat swap Miata reminds me every time I look at it, every time I think about it, and every single second that I'm working on it, why I love doing what I'm doing.
And now, you're watching the beautiful summertime Florida lakes, rivers, and swamp ass channel of YouTube. Welcome to BodeVision.
So what is up and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on another video. Like I said, this video going on right now, Hellcat swap Miata. Man, I am pumped to work on this car. So what I did the last day, the day after that video came out that I posted most recently on the Hellcat Miata. Anyways, so what I did is I continued on with what I did in the last video, but I continued it over here. I went ahead and I body worked it. I did everything. I got a bunch of the dents out. There was a bunch of dents right here. So I went ahead and I blocked them. And then when I left at the end of the day, I got this area primed really nicely. The same thing that I did over here. So you didn't miss any information. I just did more of that information further down the car. So what we want to do before the final primer is I want the entire car to look like this. This is blocked out. This is a very, very minimal dent. I wouldn't have saw this at all before, but the block doesn't lie. So that's gonna fill in there just real nicely. And also some of these deep scratches, those aren't actually scratches, that's primer filling in a scratch. So it's nice and smooth. That's blocked with a 220. Then I'm gonna prime the entire car again because I want this car to look really good. So this right here, where it's completely primed, that's what this looked like beforehand. And then this part of the car is where I haven't touched it at all. So that's a couple different stages, and I'm working just one step at a time, one panel at a time. So we got the door completely done for now. The back, I gotta block it. And then this side, I gotta start to do body work. As you can see right there, there's a good little dent right there. You can see how the reflection's kind of getting messed up right in there. And then I wanna show you how to track out some of those dents if you can't find them before. And we just gotta get working. So after working it for a little while, I have two different blocks. I was mainly using this one, and then I was also using this smaller one for this area right in here, because that big one is too big, it just catches the corners. Now the bigger the block you're using, the more accurate it's gonna be as far as getting the panel straight, but you can only use a block as so big as the area that you're working in. So the main thing we wanna focus on right now doing body work is we wanna read the surface. And what I mean by reading the surface is, you see right here, this is all underneath the primer because that's not speckled or anything. That's what was there before. Now an area like this, you see how that's speckled? That was that spray paint that I just took and I dusted the entire area. Now they also make a product for this called the guide coat, but I found that using spray paint works just fine. So going back to reading the area, this is a low spot. What I'm gonna try to do is I'm just gonna try to work it a little bit more with the block. If I find that I can't get it to come down, then I'm gonna need a little bit of skim coat or body filler on there. And then we're just moving right along. So I'm gonna continue to work on this area, continue to work on the trunk, the quarter panel. The door is pretty much done for now. So the next thing I'm gonna wanna do after that, move on with that side, and we gotta get the doors to come off because I'm gonna do the door jambs, and then I'm gonna do the exterior of the car, and we're just gonna keep on moving. So now this door is off, and the reason why I'm taking this door off and not the other one off is because I want to work the doors as they are on the car, just because it's easier that way. They're floating, they're where they're gonna be ultimately. So that's what I like to do. But now that this one is done with body work, this one can come off. because I'm gonna wanna eventually paint this jam, and then I'll get into that more when we get there. So what I wanna end up doing now is I wanna move on from that whatever, 60% of the car to over here. So Hell Kitty, that spray paint is gonna be no longer. And now with this is a perfect time and a perfect example on how I can show you on how to get some of these dents out. So we see this one over here that I showed you a minute ago, right there. And then there's also some other ones. There's one somewhere in there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of all that spray paint, and then after that the car's not gonna be glossy anymore, so it's gonna be harder to find those dents, but the block isn't gonna lie, and I'll show you how the block is actually gonna be able to expose those dents pretty easily. Okay, so you see right here, this is after I worked it with the block for quite a while, not too long, but for a little while. And you see how we're starting to see that perfect circle? That perfect circle is the dent that was there. So I just used my block and that actually exposed it, and that's one of the dents that we saw. And then also right here, you can see that. And then also you can tell, seeing that little spot, how that's still red paint, even though I kept sanding and sanding and sanding. That red paint never disappeared because that dent is actually lower than the rest of the surface. And then another thing you can do, if you just take some wax and grease remover, get a little wet, and then that'll really expose that dent too. So that dent is small enough where I'm just gonna fill it in with some body filler. If it was anything a little bigger, I might wanna pull it out with my stud welder and then the slide hammer. But for a dent this little, a little ding like that, a little bit of body filler is gonna be just fine. But before I do my body filler, I wanna etch this up a little bit, because if you put the body filler on a smooth surface, more likely it's gonna fail in the future. So we wanna scuff it up a little bit before we put on the actual filler. So after spreading out that body filler really thin, really lightly, you want to make sure you're not going too thick with the body filler, because it's not meant to fill in anything that huge. It's just meant to fill in little tiny dents, and that's what these were. So I went ahead and sanded it down. I did my DA first just to knock down all the rough stuff, and then I worked it with the block. And as you can see, it's looking pretty good. See over here how the edges are fading out nicely. And then also when we go ahead and I prime this section, that's gonna fill in some of those edges a little bit, smoothing over some of those transitions. So I gotta get the primer mixed up, car masked off, and get this area primed, and then figure out what's next. Ooh, gotta move the cars, gotta make sure there's no overspray on those. Alright, so it's the following day now, and as I'm filming this video, I'm kind of thinking and wondering if this looks a little repetitive compared to the last video, but that's the reality of it. Some of these things are taking days after days. I mean, for example, I'm spending like one entire day working on just this side, and then I'm gonna do a whole nother day working on the other side. So that's how the videos have to be, and I hope it's remaining interesting. If anything, I hope that represents that this stuff does take a very long time. So getting back to the car and what I actually have to do, now that this is all primered, as you can see, it went down really nicely. You can see how smooth it just laid out. So now I want to block that. I'm going to block it with a 220. Hopefully it can expose any other dents that I missed. So we are looking really good. Both doors are off, both jams are prepped, and another thing that I had to do right up in this area, I had to get this whole thing sanded down, prep in this area, and something like this trim. I like taking that trim off whether we're doing a color change or not doing a color change, because I would way rather have a tape line underneath that trim as opposed to right up against that trim. So the next thing we gotta do to keep this project rolling, we gotta get the car from over here to over there, get the whole thing masked off, and get it ready for that final primer. That is crazy. The video does not do this thing justice. It is insane loud. So the plan as of now is to just keep moving and to just keep working. So I had something come up. I gotta run and I gotta get out of here. In the next video, we'll work on the doors a little bit more. I gotta do the jams and everything. As you can see, I already got them prepped down pretty good. So we'll get into that a little bit later. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like this video, comment, subscribe, do all this stuff. Join the notification gang. You know what it is, YouTube. I'm out.